I think we need to discuss the difficult years our North American police have had. After non-stop calls of injustice and mass erosion of public trust, they're in a pretty rough spot. For a while, it almost seemed like there was a story every week detailing a new misuse of power. All of this has taken its toll, and we now find ourselves using the word crisis to explain the current state of this once proud institution. Despite good policing putting in their best efforts to represent the uniform, public anger would eventually reach a boiling point, and this time there would be no going back to the status quo. The fallout would damage the very foundation of policing and put public safety in the worst position it has been for decades. Here are the obstacles that now must be overcome to reverse these trends and bring pride of service back to our police officers. For those men and women who put the uniform on every day, it has been their morale and confidence that have been hit the hardest. It started with the dispassionate and impartial calls for sweeping reform that left many of these officers feeling unheard and unappreciated. While legacy police officers, often the experienced backbone of a department, have seen these changes as a subtle way to put them quietly out to pasture, and now they're leaving in droves. A recent survey of 200 departments saw drastic spikes in both retirement and resignations in the last few years. In some cases, this was as much as a 45% increase. These departments, despite gradually bringing in younger recruits, are struggling to hire. Several surveys can tell us why. Potential applicants and career officers alike will speak to the current climate of negativity surrounding law enforcement as their primary factor when deciding not to join or remain. This carries into the public trust of the police, which has also been declining sharply. In Canada, a majority of citizens still have faith in their police officers. However, the majority of these are in the 65 or older age bracket. Just 51% of those under 34 years of age had any favorable view of their police officers. For Americans, the problem goes even deeper. Confidence in police is now at record lows for the first time since records began over 27 years ago. A majority of Americans no longer trust law enforcement. They point to the ongoing civil discourse and racial injustice among policing as largely to blame. If police morale was already soured over the persistent negative narrative, then consider pandemic fatigue as one more weight on that pile. Police are well known to take a loss of their own incredibly seriously, yet this pandemic has proven to be 5 times more deadly than gunfire since it began. Despite this, law enforcement and their unions have staunchly resisted vaccine mandates. Instead, police are choosing to end their careers, one way or another. The reasons they gave for choosing inaction while also experiencing the deadliest year on record since policing began: distrust in the science and other disinformation that has been proven inaccurate. As we enter 2022, it's clear this isn't going to be a better year to have staffing problems. Multiple cities had an explosion in shootings and murders last year. This sucks, considering in 2014 we were still continuing historically low levels of violent crime. Actually, in many ways, we have been going backward. Look how domestic terrorism has returned in such a big way. White supremacy is now considered the greatest threat to Americans, and this rise in violent extremism has led to the creation of new domestic terrorism units. These are a direct response to the Capitol riots and the growing popularity in homegrown militias.
Absolutely listen to what I'm saying, because this is a warning for what's coming. It's not going to be peaceful much longer. It's not going to be rah-rah. It's not going to be speeches. It's not going to be gathered outside saying a Pledge of Allegiance. It's not going to be waving flags. It's going to be real. If it has to be against our own citizens, it will happen. And there's a million people like me, and you won't stop us.
This is one of the only areas you will hear any popular calls for increased policing. Scrutiny and public opinion are driving pressure to reduce the militarization of the police force. In fact, over 30 states have passed more than 140 bills addressing police oversight since the murder of George Floyd. These bills are already working to enact laws that mandate the wearing of body cameras or overhauling police disciplinary measures in the event of line-of-duty negligence. New York City can be used as an example, and have recently enacted a law that makes it easier for citizens to sue officers when they are found to have acted improperly. Whether you agree with these changes or not, it's hard to argue that major systemic problems have been allowed to continue unimpeded for years, and this massive shift calling for better police accountability and trust was only a matter of time. Powerful police unions and interagency codependence have for too long defended and even hidden abysmal behavior. You don't need to take my word for it either. Multiple studies which have been long ignored have already proven the harmful links between police unions and abuse, corruption, and decreased accountability.
Bullshit. Bullshit is my response to that.
Luckily, when civil unrest finally spilt over, it brought along with it the light of public exposure and its disinfecting properties. This would manifest into conversations that would eventually form at town halls and nationwide venues alike. Here, we would criticize what police do, how they are funded, and the new measures that they should be held accountable to. It is this criticism that resigning officers would cite as their primary motivations to quit. And yeah, it was loud, uncoordinated, and filled with rage. At first. In time, it became more focused and a common sense approach was adopted. This collective anger is now being molded into popular reforms that both sides largely agree with. For example, these new policies might allow police to pull back and focus on specifically violent aspects of crime. This allows other previous responsibilities such as mental health and substance abuse to fall on other first responders. I want to take this moment to address those of us that were hoping for a more radical endgame. This was always going to be the logical conclusion for a civilized world. Abolishing the police was never a feasible rallying cry, but maybe redistributing some of the budget towards the social systems and services that can cause or alleviate aspects of crime is. I know, it's just less catchy on a billboard. This still leaves us the problem of recruiting a new generation of police. It might just highlight everything I want to say about their image problem when I can point to both record low application rates and record high pay rates. The hard truth is that younger generations have little interest in representing a uniform they now view as holding little integrity, or even oppressive in a more dramatic circumstance. These are deep-rooted problems, and they will take as long to repair as they took to make. The good news here is that when we come out on the other side, we should see record minority hiring, massive increases toward community interaction, and new levels of police scrutiny and self-reflection. The next generation of police officers might even have to attain a college degree, and hopefully at the very least, they should start receiving more training hours than a barber or cosmetologist. Lastly, some people will argue that we lost irreplaceable members of the police force. I don't necessarily see it that way. Any officers that quit this calling because they refused to change when their communities pleaded with them to realign back with their needs is not an officer I feel bad for losing. That brings me to my final hot take. I believe the most important change to come out of the last few years will be the continued weeding out of those law enforcement members that perhaps were not qualified to serve in the first place. I know it's rough right now, both for the communities and the police forces across North America. But one day, those who are left will reverse the public narrative, so we can once more, without exception, commend the men and women who chose to put service above self.
If we don't have engagement with each other in constructive ways, then we will continue to be in the same place. And 50 years from now, we'll be talking about the same things.